everybody. It's time for Our Kids Play Goalie. Got a very famous, very notable guest today in Clint Malarchuk. If you do not know who that is, stop really quick and Google his name. He played in the NHL for 12 years. He has an amazing story after dodging death 3 times in multiple ways, one of them being suicide. He is a mental health advocate. He has been for many years, and this has been an amazing discussion about goaltending, but also about, mental fitness, mental health, and his journey to do that. It's an important episode that you should listen to. You can listen to this one with your kids if you want to talk about that conversation. Promise you, it's not a downer. It's very uplifting and fun, and you're going to enjoy it. Also, if you have a chance, stop and make sure you subscribe if you haven't already. Give us that 5-star review. And make sure that you're sharing this with people, because it really is important we get these messages out there to build our community, but really the community around mental health, mental fitness, and doing the best we can as parents, coaches, and players to just make this a better place for everybody. So without further ado, let's get you into the episode. Clint Malarchuk is with us today on Our Kids Play Goalie. Hello, hockey friends and families around the world, and welcome to another episode of our super popular spin-off series to Our Kids Play Hockey titled Our Kids Play Goalie. Our guest today, Clint Malarchuk, is a 12-year NHL goaltending veteran and an inductee into New York State Hockey Hall of Fame. But beyond those accolades, which are impressive on their own, Clint's story and life are changing the way we look at mental health in the game and beyond. As a suicide survivor and someone who has experienced trauma throughout his life from childhood on, Clint now dedicates his life to helping others. He has accomplished this through speaking regularly on mental health, authoring his biography titled Crazy Game, How I Survived in the Crease and Beyond. In the US, it's called A Matter of Inches. Make sure you pick that up if you haven't already. He's also the host of the Warriors Unmasked podcast, and he serves as a figurehead for the movement throughout his work with the Ranch Teammates for Life organization, which we'll talk about today, and other groups on similar missions. We're going to have a very impactful conversation today about goaltending and mental health, so make sure you stick around for the whole episode. I know Mike and I are looking forward to it. Clint, let me be the first to welcome you to Our Kids Play Goalie.
My pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Hey, it's our honor to have you today. So, Clint, again, the focus of today's conversation is going to be about mental health, mental fitness. But as it is a goaltending show, you are a very famous goaltender. I want to ask you, how did you get into the position? Everybody's got a unique story about how they ended up in the net. Sometimes it's a sibling thing. Sometimes it's just the way your mind works. Sometimes it's luck of the draw. How did you end up becoming a goalie?
Well, my dad was a goaltender in senior leagues up in Canada. Back then, senior leagues were pretty high level. And he played without a mask. That's how far back. Yeah. You're looking at me probably going, I don't think you wore a mask either. But and then my brother, big brother, 7 years older, that's 7 years is quite a bit. So I kind of looked up to him big time. So I had 2 of those guys ahead of me. So I wanted to be a goalie like they were. They insisted that I play forward till I think I started playing goal at 9 years old. The reason being is they said you got to learn to skate,
right?
So that was kind of how I ended up in the pipes.
I think any goaltending coach worth their salt will tell a young goalie, you need to learn to skate, because the goalie's got to be the best skater on the team. It's just
they
the
don't
way
have
it
to
is.
be they don't have to be the fastest, but they do have to have good edges, good push, good balance, really.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. My son, who just literally turned 9 the other day, is a goalie. It's funny. Clint, when I say that, I still find myself saying, is he a goalie? Yeah, he's a goalie. He just fits the personality, and that's what they've told him. So we have him skate a lot. Clint, I want to dive into this here. We talk a lot on this show about how we all love the game, but the game shouldn't necessarily define who we are solely, right? That it's not just I'm a hockey player. Obviously, in your life, you had to deal with a moment in time threatening to become what defines you, right? How did you overcome that? And what are your thoughts on having the game define who you are, especially for the youth hockey players listening?
Well, I think that's a great statement. For me, I can really speak to that, because if I had a good game, I was a good person, a good kid. And if I had a bad game, I felt like I was a bad kid or a bad person. And that's really not healthy thinking at all. But my dad was kind of, he was a great guy, don't get me wrong, but he was an abusive alcoholic. So I think some of that I got from being under that pressure of, hockey was everything for me. But I had a hard time sorting through some of those things, good game, good kid, that sort of thing. And I can't tell you when I pulled out of that, or I was definitely playing, pro hockey,
Right.
and still feeling that way. And like I said, that's really not a good place to be, for anybody. It doesn't define who we are as a person. It's just something a person does.
Right.
It took me a long time to learn that.
Yeah, I think one of the hardest things to overcome, I think, for us as parents, watching other parents, and especially like somebody like me in my position, watching an abusive parent, or watching an overbearing parent, or watching a parent that is pushing their kids to be at every skills clinic, every program, every tryout, is that when you talk to them, they understand, and they watch somebody like you who succeeded. So they're like, well, he's succeeded. I'm like, well, I know, but what's your definition of success? I mean,
Right.
and that's, there's so many kids that get pushed this way, right, without their own doing, and they happen to make it to the highest level. But I think what's lost on all of us at the youth level is we don't see the thousands of kids that didn't make it,
Right.
that experience the exact same thing. I mean, so wouldn't you say that, like in your situation and some other professional athlete situations that come from this type of background, you were just lucky, like you made it through,
Yeah.
where a lot of kids just don't. Many kids don't.
Yeah, we're talking a little bit on the parents, and how they kind of act, and everything, as you started with your comments there. And I still give private lessons occasionally, and more than once I've had a parent standing on the bench yelling and screaming at the kid. I'm giving a private lesson. It's not a game. It's not even a real practice. We're going through drills and sequences, and you got this parent yelling at their kid and then waving the kid over to the bench, and telling the kid what to. I mean, come on, you wanted me to give the lessons, and I've got the background and experience, and here you are butting in, and you know what I say to myself, or say in my I guess in the back of my head, is this poor kid's going to quit the game before he's even 15, 16 years old, because that's just overbearing to the kid. It wears on them. I think it's just a negative impact. And parents they can be the worst enemy for a kid. As much as they love their kid and want the kid to succeed, I don't think they realize the damage they can be doing. Let the coach,
Right.
let the kid have fun. When you leave the rink, leave the game at the rink.
Yeah.
Clint, I can tell you too, you said this too. It comes from a place of love, right? The overbearing parent. And I always like to say that, because along with that, the overbearing parent doesn't realize they're the overbearing parent typically. And the things that they tell themselves, and look, I'm guilty of this at times too. I'm very competitive, but I've heard, I just want my kid to be competitive. I've heard that. And I said, right, but you need them to love the game first. If they don't love the game, it won't matter. The other thing too is you're creating a value set for that kid that is unrealistic, of that you need to be perfect, or you need to do this right all the time. And in a way, you take the creativity out of the game, right? And that's really the best part. It's the pond hockey nature of it. But to the parents listening out there, and I'd love for you to talk to them about this again. It comes from a place of love, but you gotta check yourself. Make sure that you're not, vicariously, accidentally living through the kid, right? And again, we're all guilty of that. And then also you got to check your ego, because I think what happens is some parents double, triple, quadruple down on the no, I'm just trying to help them. And you're almost blind to the fact that you're not. It's doing quite the opposite.
Well, a lot of parents, I think their kid's the one. He's going to make it. He's going to be in the NHL, or if it's a gal playing goal, they're going to go collegiate and that. Oh, it's not always the case, right?
Right.
But they want it so bad. I think for the kid more than themselves. I think they would really want it for their kid.
Right.
But nowadays too, the coaches. When I played minor hockey, and that, it was always a parent that coached, right? Maybe a couple parents. And now they have like levels of coaching that you have to graduate through coaching levels and certificates, get these certificates to be a coach. So it's not like the coach does know what they're doing. They've been having to pass an exam to get to that, coaching level.
Right.
Yeah, and I think knowing that, like, sometimes I'll joke around, like I do a lot of coaching education for USA Hockey in the States
Yeah.
here, and
USA Hockey.
and
There's your go-to right there.
and you have, but there's certainly a lot of people that like, so there's a big difference to me in, and I love your comment about, like, when I grew up, it was all parent coaching. And, there was no certifications. I mean, who even knew what the background was, half these people, and who, maybe we didn't want to know. But I think in the way it's structured right now, the tools are out there for any coach to become a better coach and understand, the format of the game. But I think, one of the things that's lacking in all the coaching education, and I don't know if you know Wally Kozak, he's a Canadian
very
guy.
well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so Wally and I talk every week, and one of his aspects, him and Tim Bothwell, I think
Yeah,
he probably played in the
I know the
NHL.
group. I
Yeah,
know
so
the
that,
group you're talking about.
yeah. So the Sharks there, and what we talk about all the time is the lack of education of the mental side, of the compassionate side, of the ethical side. And maybe we didn't know this all growing up because there wasn't social media, and we didn't see the mom climbing over the glass yelling at an official, and we didn't see somebody throwing a garbage can across the rink, and like we didn't see a lot of that because we were all in our own little worlds. I mean, it definitely happened. It happened, right? But I think now that there's so much exposure, one of the things we have to do is understand that we're educating the X's and O's, certainly, but there's even more of an emphasis because of the exposure to educate the mental side, the compassionate side. And maybe you could speak to that a little bit. I mean, even your unqualified, parent coaching, the one thing they did know how to do was be a parent, right? First. And I think what we've lost a lot is when we watch the pro coach. Listen, there's a binder of level 5 USA Hockey coaches that I have that I would never allow to coach my kid, ever step on the ice of my kid. I don't care how high a level certification are, because they're just not good people. So I think finding good people first, and then letting them teach the game, I think is one of the top priorities. I think we have to look at.
Oh, absolutely. I couldn't have said it better, but you get the mix, of course. Not every coach is going to be the greatest, but you got to remember, they're out there trying, and they're doing their best to help your kid or that kid. And we should probably be thanking them rather than ridiculing them.
Right. They're so important to our game, because if you don't have coaches and officials, we talked about it all the time, we don't have a game, right? You can skate all you want, but I think even more so with the goaltending side. I mean, I watch, when we ask people to raise their hands to be a goaltender at 7, 8 years old, I mean, we with the stigma is, oh, this kid raised his hand, what's wrong with him? Like, there must be something wrong with him, so stick him in the net and let him keep him there. But I think that whole idea that we have to, how do we nurture kids to play goalie, be respectful of the position as far as the skill development, but also embrace the fact that it is a different position. There's a different level of anxiety for the parent and the kid.
Oh yeah.
And we have to also understand it's a lot easier for us to knock a kid out of the net, and we can't replace them. Like, how many kids are raising their hand to play goalie in a group of 15 kids? One.
Well, back in my day, it was either the fat kid or the kid that couldn't skate. And you're the goalie. You can't skate, you're the goalie. You're overweight, you can't move fast enough, you're the goalie. Right. And so what I hear you saying too is you got to respect that position. It's a tough one, not just physically, but mentally. And I think the worst thing is a hockey goalie mom, because she has to sit there with that anxiety. If he lets in a goal, everybody's going to blame him. And to a point, there is some truth to that, especially if it's he wins or loses the game. I mean, he could lose the game by a bad goal or, bad game. And there's that pressure that goes with it, even as the kids at the young ages, because, we're competitors, and that's why we play sports. So that with that competitiveness comes that self-made pressure that and again, that position is full of pressure.
Yeah, my son plays lacrosse goalie, and when he gets scored on, my wife goes, "Well, what about the guys that lost the ball down there, and then they got through the middies, and then the middies lost the ball and got through the D, and then the D didn't know how to cover the player, and it was an open net. It's not his fault."
Well, they always say that.
Well, eventually it's somebody's fault, but I mean, again, it's a full team effort. But the goalie is his own thing.
Several mistakes made before the puck gets shot on the goal. I mean, there's a breakdown here or there, several, or somebody coughs up a puck. I mean, but no one sees that Well, they
No.
see it, but then once that puck crosses the goal line, that's what they remember.
Well, it's the
Yeah,
same
unless the
thing in
goalie, unless the
coaching,
goalie's
you know?
diving out of the, unless the
Right.
goalie's diving out of the way of the puck, then maybe it's probably not completely his fault.
Yeah.
That was me. I get real skinny as a goalie.
Well,
Right.
and Mike, we always say it, right? As coaches, when we win the games, the players did it. When we lose the game, it was the coach's fault.
Right. Right.
Clint, I'll tell you this too with my kid, and again, like you, I'm a mental health advocate. And when he jumped in net, I remember my concern was not, pucks going in the net. It was, my kid's a pretty emotional kid
Right.
at his age. And so I took more of an approach of using the position as a vehicle for his growth in that way. And I have been astounded at his resiliency of when a puck goes in the net and controlling himself and understanding how to deal with those emotions. And that's what I coach to when we do talk about it. I try never to coach him in the car or anything after the game, but we talk about, okay, when the puck goes in the net, what is your process mentally, son, to kind of overcome what's happening? He's not always perfect at it. Again, he's just turned 9. But I'm so proud of him that he says, I have to do better at just getting focused after a goal. To me, no matter what he does in the game, right? If he stops in 5 years or 1 year, he's learning a valuable life lesson that goes beyond hockey. And I always said this is a sports in general, but hockey specifically is a vehicle for our kids' growth as human beings. And when you focus on that, it really creates good people. And I always said this: good people make good players, right? When you get to that point.
Yeah. Well, that's what sports does to us. It helps build character, helps coping mechanisms with pressure, how to channel, how to focus. But you'll even hear goalie coaches, head coaches, and even commentators talk about how a certain goaltender, and I'm talking in the NHL, where he's very, very capable of parking a bad goal or a bad game and coming back with a strong performance, or rebounding with great saves after a bad goal. And I think it's a learned talent, really, that you have to focus, you have to learn how to mentally rehearse. Like I used to, when I'd let in a goal, good or bad, I used to mentally rehearse the goal going in, see it, and I'm doing all this before the next face-off. See it go, and then I'd redo it in my head. Hopefully I could get 5 times in of making the save, doing something different. And then I was able to park it. And so that was a tool that I had learned from a book that I had read. And, it was about mental toughness, or enhancing your mental game as an athlete. And what I liked about the book, it gave a 6-week practice. You did a certain thing 1 week, and then you expanded on that in week 2, adding another skill. And you had to do this. I think it was 20 minutes a day. It was like going into the gym and riding a bike for 20 minutes.
Right.
So it really, really helped. I believe that book made me from an American Hockey League goaltender to an NHL goaltender. Because whenever I got called up to the NHL, I'd do okay, but I was lighting it up in the American League. And I was like, why can't I do that in the NHL? What is the difference? Bigger stage, bigger. Now you got TV. They didn't have TV in the American League when I played. All the, the pressures now with the internet, you can stream games, even if there's a thing called, something barn.
Yeah,
Live Barn, Hockey TV.
Yeah. My wife's the figure skating director at here in Reno Ice, and she's got that barn TV, so she can see what's going on the ice anytime.
Right.
And so, I mean, how far have we come with that?
I've had adult league players send me clips of them playing adult league hockey, which is, I mean, it's silly to me, but hey, whatever floats you. But do you remember the name of that book by chance?
It's an old book, obviously.
Yeah.
It's called Sports Psyching by Dr. Thomas Tutko, Tutko. And I think there's a co-author too, but he's the main guy.
Well, one of the nice things about the internet, Clinton, is that we can find anything. So we'll make sure we look that one up.
A former player, Tim Tukey, and we do adult camps here up in Reno. I live about an hour outside of Reno. And you would not believe, it's mostly beer league guys, right? And gals too. We get girls playing too. And we put them together, the men and the women. And I'll tell you, the intensity and the willingness to learn and improve It's unbelievable. I'm like, it really, I love doing the adult camps. I really do.
Yeah, yeah.
I believe
Yeah,
it.
I mean, well, that's one, and but again, that's where you think about. I mean, just that's just understanding that you went out, researched this on your own, found this book on your own. Think about the resources that are available now to NHL goalies, right? They're not having to read a book or go search it out because hopefully, well, that, again, maybe we need to even start bringing this down every level, right? Is that if this is accessible to our everyday players, like why are we waiting then not to be proactive in adding these into our programs like Lee does with his little kids, even his 8-year-olds, is a lot of those things that you're doing, that mental toughness training or that recovery ability. Like we need to add this into the player development spectrum for what we do with our kids, because I think we just say, I think like when I grew up, it was just like, well, I don't know, toughen up, like just stop the damn puck. Like how hard can it be? So we don't think about all the other things that go through a player's heads. And then the fact is the game is mental. I mean, if you can't understand that as an ex-player going in, how can you teach it to these young kids that are now, to your point, they're like, when was the first time, Clint, right, that you saw yourself on film as a goalie? Probably really late in your career, right? I mean, and now these kids see it on the bench during the play.
Yeah.
I mean, so like it's like, think about how fast we're asked to recall a mistake.
Yeah.
Where years ago you didn't even know you made a mistake.
Well, what you said right off the start there was just do it. Just do it. Well, how? Where's the how?
Right.
And to expand on not just the mental side, now the athletes, and they start very young now. It's not just in junior hockey; they start younger. Nutritionists, fitness, off-ice fitness coaching, things like that. And these kids are starting that at 13, 14 years old. So there's a lot more resources on the how to do it, not just back in the day. Just do it.
Just do it.
Where's the how?
I want to bring up a couple things here, Clint. One of the terms you said earlier that I loved, I've actually never heard this before, is that mental rehearsing. I want to reiterate that to the audience. I think that's a really great statement. And then you alluded to this too about, I use the term mental fitness a lot in my work because I think it equates easily to physical fitness, and everybody understands. And we talk about this all the time on the show. You work out, you'll get in shape. If you stop, you will get out of shape, and your mind works very similarly. What I find in my line of work, I want to definitely turn the conversation this way, is that the stigma surrounding mental health, mental fitness is starting to break a little bit. We just have a long way to go. And when I say it's breaking, what I find when I work with coaches and teams now is that it's not a just shut up and don't feel anymore. It's okay, you have feelings. There's a mental side of the game, but that is kind of now where the conversation stops. It's, as you just said, okay, well, what am I supposed to do about it? And as Mike said, a lot of my work that's where I start to fill in the gap. So, well, let's do 2 minutes of meditation with 8-year-olds, which is extremely hard, but they can do it and they learn how to do it. Now we're planting seeds at a very young age of mental health, mental fitness, and understanding that your mind is just as important as any skill set you have physically. Do you want to comment on that?
Well, I think it goes back to what I said about that book. It gave a 6-week program,
right?
You actually put into your game. If you were scored on or between face-offs, you were mentally rehearsing something. You were visualizing. You were preparing for the drop of the puck and the next sequence of plays. And you touched on it too. We're teaching how now instead of just do it. Right. But yeah, I think that comment about you go to the gym, you work out. We've done that part for years and years and years. Right. And we're starting to really graduate more and more into the mental part. Right. It's like lifting weights with your brain or your mind.
Doing reps, mental reps. That's what I call them.
Yep. And it's so important. Like I said, I think that's what got me out of the minor leagues and into the NHL. But I did the program. I did it every day. And, I implemented what I learned and practiced, more importantly, what I practiced mentally into my game, what I was doing.
I'm just thinking here too. Now that's very forward thinking for that time period. That was not a wildly accepted thing back then. In fact, there's probably looked at as weakness or as you know, this stigma goes. You know, Clint, just continue this. Look, as we said, there is a stigma surrounding mental health. You know, and for the audience listening, Clint's works are well documented. His life is well documented. I encourage you all to look him up, look at his TED Talks, look at his speeches, because he talks on this all the time. And, you know, just in researching the show, I remember, you know, you have said you suffered in silence in your life. And while we know that the conversation of mental health is more prevalent, we are still seeing some of the highest rates of suicide among young athletes ever.
Yeah.
So my question is, what can we do as a community to get better at this? So not just the coaches and the parents, but as a community, how do we break the stigma and have these conversations that we need to have?
Well, the word you just used, conversations, and we need to talk about it rather than brushing things under the rug and turning our back to it and pretending it's not there. I just got back from University of Minnesota. I spoke there, and there was a lot of student athletes. I was kind of overwhelmed by how many emails I got. You know, on, hey, I struggle, and I'm afraid that, you know, that it's going to affect my game. All sorts of different comments. But I was kind of like, wow, you know, there's a lot of pressure on student athletes. You know, they got the education, right. They got to juggle their sport with going to classes and studying and everything. But we've come a long ways with the erasing the stigma, but we got a lot of work to do still.
Right.
And I think you got to talk about it. You know, that's why I'm really impressed when companies, corporations, universities, even high schools bring somebody like me in to talk and tell their story. And for a lot of people, for the first time, they've heard of maybe a former professional athlete really open up about what they dealt with. And yeah, you know, mine was more than the pressure of playing goal in the NHL. I also struggled with mental illness, and I did as a kid too. So, and I used to think I was mentally weak because I had all this anxiety issues and depression. And I look back now and I go, I wasn't mentally weak. I was dealing with NHL pressure and mental illness. I was double tough. Right. But at the time, I sure didn't think that. And as you mentioned, I suffered in silence and darkness. I didn't want anybody to know that I struggled with these issues because it would be perceived as weak.
Right.
And it's not a weakness. It is not a weakness. It's so many people can relate to depression, anxiety, obsessive compulsive disorder, which I have. But they do it in silence because they feel they're going to be judged. And we're getting more progress, I think, opening up more. Like I said, when people bring people like me in to speak, they're obviously seeing that we have a problem, whether it be in our school, our company, or, you know, the HR people. They're forming hotlines where it's all anonymous, where, you know, they can get help through the company, but no one knows they're struggling. And, you know, it's funny, if you were diagnosed with, let's say, God forbid, cancer, well, you know, you got to do treatment, you know, all these things, medications. And, you know, probably the first thing you're going to do is go into your boss or your employer and say, hey, I got to go through this. And what are they going to do? They're going to say, what can we do to help? Take time off, work at home, do it, you know, take care of yourself. Now, if you have mental illness, what are the chances you going into your coach or your boss and saying, hey, I really struggle with depression and anxiety because of the stigma? They're afraid they're going to be judged. And in a lot of cases, they still are. But we're getting better and better, I think, as a society with that.
Yeah. And Clint, I'll tell you, Mike, I'll throw it to you in a minute. Sorry, that this is an issue that goes so well beyond hockey and sports. We're seeing this in military. We're seeing this just in daily work. People afraid to go to their bosses. You know, one of the things I wanted to say too is that, keeping in sports for a second, they've done polls. Everyone can look this up. They've polled young athletes, what is the number one topic that you're most interested in? And it is always today, mental health, mental fitness, or some version of that. But with that said, I would ask all the parents out there, myself included, how often do your kids bring this up to you? Right? Because there is a bit of a generational gap here, right? We should also say this too, Clint, that a lot of the understanding of mental illness didn't exist 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, right? So
No.
it's some of it's people are a victim of their time. They didn't understand. We didn't know, right? But you bring up cancer, and it's amazing to me because you have an illness. There's medicines, but you know what? I doubt most people are diving into how chemo and radiation work to the cellular level. They just know they need it.
Yeah.
Right. So we have to find the analogies here of sometimes it is talking to someone. Going to a therapist is not a weakness.
No,
It is not.
it's courageous. It's
I agree.
self-help. And
Right.
I use an example all the time in my talks because I'm trying to break down the stigma. And when you mentioned the word military, and I think who are the most mentally toughest men and women in the world? I would have to say military,
Right.
first responders, but I think of military right now as an example. And we have these mentally tough people. You have to be to do that job. You could die. You're going on tour. You're away from home for maybe a year at a time, and mental toughness huge. Yet in the U.S. we have 22 suicides a day
Every day.
just by Iraq and Afghanistan veterans. They go over there and they get mentally damaged, PTSD. They come back, they self-medicate and die by suicide. And and my point is, it doesn't matter how tough you are. I know for me, I don't produce enough serotonin. My brain, it's a the mood chemical. And that's why I'm prone to depression and anxiety and OCD and all these things. So what's the difference if you're diabetic? It's a chemical imbalance of, I think, the pancreas. My chemical imbalances of the brain. So what is the difference? Please don't label me as weak.
Right.
And a diabetic is different. It's different organ.
Yeah, and I'll say this too, and Mike, I'll throw it to you. What's interesting about stats, right? The 22 a day stat, which actually I believe is actually a lot higher right now post-COVID.
Could be.
To put that in context for people listening, if you did the math on, let's just keep it at 22 a day, of how many veterans we lose to suicide a year and compare that to how many casualties of war we have, it is a staggering difference.
Yeah.
All right. We lose an extremely amount of more people to suicide than war. And we're not taking care of our veterans for that. Yeah. or each other. And the steps to do that are a lot easier than you might think. A lot of it is just empathy and acceptance. But even just asking someone, how are you today? Are you okay? Or if you believe someone to be suicidal, coming right to them and saying, are you having suicidal thoughts? Right? The direct way is the right way, I think, with that.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I think too that, if we put as much resources into helping people or educating people on mental illness and mental health, what crime would be down, prison population would be down. A lot of the criminal element or criminal that are in prison are mentally ill.
Right.
And they might be self-medicating, getting into drugs, alcohol, or whatever, and performing these crimes, and they go to prison. But if we were to educate at a young age that, hey, there's help. If you're struggling, and we're getting better. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to bang on the system. I mean, we've come a long, long ways, especially from when I was really struggling and first got diagnosed at around 30 years old. I'm 61 now. Yeah,
the conversation's going the right way, for sure. I agree with you. We're making headway, but I always reflect on this too. There was a young player in the OHL that recently committed suicide, and a high-ranking person in the OHL the week before had said, "Oh, we've got that mental health stuff under control."
Yeah,
and I remember thinking, it's not something you get under control. That's just the statement is almost incorrect. So I agree with you. We're definitely going the right direction, but there's a long way to go. Mike, I've sucked up enough of the oxygen in the last 5 minutes. I apologize. I know you had a question there. Sorry about that.
I forget. That's a lot to unpack right now in the last 5 minutes, though.
One thing before I forget, because I will forget. Concussions. The statement you said, Lee, was, and I really had a hard time with this too, because I was like, well, what do you mean? What do you mean? We've grown up with committed suicide. And I was told, do not say that. Not when I public speaking, I was really kind of people are banging on my door. Do not say commit. I'm like, well, that's what you say. We grew up with that phrase.
Right.
And they said to me, do you die? Do you commit a heart attack? Do you commit cancer? No, we say died by suicide. I had a hard time getting that out because the
Right.
go-to phrase is commit suicide. It's what we
Right.
grew up with. So our verbiage is getting better even. And at first I was kind of offended. What's the big deal? And I thought about it and I went, no, there's something to that.
Oh, I agree. Like, when it comes to suicide, not to keep this on suicide too long, but if you ask someone if they're all right and they're contemplating suicide, they might tell you they're fine.
Oh yeah.
And that's why I said, and again, I was fortunate enough to go through some training for this, and I'm thankful for that training every day. But it was hard. I remember, Mike, I never told you this. They made us go through an exercise where we had to practice asking someone, "Are you contemplating suicide? Are you having suicidal thoughts?" And even in the practice, it was really hard. I mean, it was hard. It got real serious, and I realized in that moment, wow, this was a hurdle I had to get over myself. And I'm not someone who's thankfully I've never experienced that, right? But people do every day, and there's a guarantee you're walking by someone who's doing it just by statistics. So again, for hockey parents, I want to make sure keep it on hockey. It's okay to have those conversations with your kids. Your kid might roll their eyes, right? They might act like they don't want to talk about it, but just them knowing that you care, just them knowing that you're on top of it. Is there the other staggering stat about suicide was that almost everyone contemplating, thinking about it, almost everyone is looking for help or looking for someone to talk to them about it.
Yeah.
Right.
Just the last thing, I guess, on suicide that, I think you mentioned I'm a suicide survivor. And I can tell you this, I've heard suicide described as cowardly. I've heard it described as courageous because, that takes something, courage to do, I would think. And it's neither. It's sick. It's somebody that's really emotionally ill in a bad way. Maybe life isn't good. It's not always mental illness. Yeah, I always try to preach too. Sometimes it's because a lot of people, well, I'm not mentally ill, but if you say emotional distress, oh shoot, I can relate to that. Oh, that divorce I went through, I was a basket case. I was depressed. I was anxious. So sometimes people get turned. They're not mentally ill, but if you say emotionally distressed, well, yeah, we've all been that way. Everybody.
Absolutely. Then I want to bring us back to actually the goalie position a little bit too. So one of the goals with this offshoot of our show was to create an episode that focused on goaltending, but that everyone could relate to, right? Not just goalies or goaltending coaches, but coaches, players, skaters, parents. And one of the questions we like to ask is, what are the questions that youth coaches should be asking about the goaltending position that maybe they're not currently asking, right? It's not just, hey, stop the puck. There's a little bit more to it than that.
First question, are you having fun? Do you enjoy stopping pucks? Do you enjoy this position? That's the first question, because some kids will go, they tried to be a goalie and now they're stuck there and they're not really enjoying it. They're not built for that. They're not wired for that position. So that's the first question. And then, we could ask all the other questions, but they're not really questions. There are things we should be looking for. How good of a skater is my goalie? Again, when I do private lessons, I get these kids and they can barely stand up, and I'm flipping pucks at them and they can't because they don't have balance. So that's what you got to do is you got to look for, can the kid skate before you stick him in goal? And is he working on his skating? And like my wife teaches figure skating and power skating. And the first thing I'll do is go to a parent and say, forget me right now. Let your kid work with her. And then he can come to me or she can come to me. It's amazing too. Like, and I don't want to get off topic here. Some of my best goalies, I shouldn't say best goalies, best students are female, young girls. And I always think, why is that? I don't know if it's the wiring, male, female, or whatever, but they just, I think they process things different than the guy. Guys that are eager, aggressive, keen. competitive women, I think, and this is my own thinking because I kind of study it myself, is they're more analytical. They retain, or not retain, they listen better. And you put a kid out there and he just wants to go, whether it's goalie, forward, D, whatever. And I find it, even with our adult groups, the women tend to process things a little bit more in depth. It's my own opinion.
Well, I mean, we see that a lot with our, like, I work a lot with 8U kids and 10U kids, and just that what you mentioned earlier about making sure are they enjoying the position. And I think one of the things that's kind of occurred in our game, which has been a really positive piece of this, is we've gone to, like, I know in the USA hockey level, we've gone to intermediate nets for the little 8-year-old kids, so they're not in a regulation net. And I mean, literally, this just happened last night. We have 8, 9, 10 different kids that try goalie, quick change gear, they throw it in there. We don't put the player in a full size regulation NHL net, but we put them in an age appropriate net that actually that kid left. I mean, you couldn't have had a bigger smile on your face, because so many, I don't know if he even made a lot of saves, but a lot of pucks hit him. And the pucks that hit him, he felt he saved them, and his teammates felt he saved them. And all of a sudden, like, oh my God, this kid's like a real goaltender. Like, he's stopping pucks and it's hitting them. But we gave him the chance to have success because there just wasn't anywhere else to put the puck. And I think, that was a huge piece. Yeah,
that's a great concept. And not only that, some parents will, their kid's not a goalie and they're like, well, my kid can't score on that. No, you're helping that kid be a better shooter.
Well, right. We say it all the time. Yeah. In our non-goaltending episodes, we talk about that all the time. Like, if you want to teach the whole athlete, well, it's not. So Clint, how many games in the NHL has a puck lofted over your shoulder and fallen into the net? Never. It doesn't happen, right? So what we do is,
you're talking to me.
Well, maybe. Well, maybe. I don't want to bring up any bad memories. But I mean, I think it's the like, to make it look like the real game, then our shooters need to learn how to put the puck on a rope. Like, you need to shoot. And so an elevated puck is not the same as a looping puck. And I think that's what happens when the kids get into these huge nets, that pucks are looping over their shoulder. And we're asking them, I mean, you as a teacher, right? We're asking them to do things that just aren't in a normal thing. We would, normal movements that we would see in a real goaltender. Yeah. But I think my whole point was the fact that, if we put our kids in places where they can find success and they can get confidence and they can feel good about being in the position, we're going to get more kids that want to be in the position. Yep. And, and I think that's our job at 6 and 7 and 8 years old is to find, joy, is to make sure that the kids love being on the ice. And I don't know if I put a kid in the net and he gave up, 27 goals in his first experience, if he would find joy in being in the net. I don't think so. No.
Well, and as a goalie coach too, I always like, when you bring some shooters out so you can do, drills. And what I always tell the goal, sure, I'm out there for the goalies. I'm the goalie coach, okay? But I tell the shooters, do this. It's hard for the goalie. Goalies do not like this. It's a tough save, like dragging the puck, changing the angle, getting the goalie moving lateral where he has to open up and close again. Make it good for the goalie and good for the shooters, an education for both.
We have Steve Valaket working with the kids down here, and I see the kids are clamoring. The shooters are like climbing over themselves to get on the ice with Steve to shoot. And he doesn't really, I think he's teaching them more than the shooting coach is teaching them, because he's telling them, this is where goalies are weaker. This is where I need to improve my goalie's reaction to this type of shot. But listen, I need you to take this type of shot, because this is the shot that on a goalie that I'm not teaching won't be able to stop. So I think it's,
or shoot for a rebound. Sometimes you're at a bad angle.
Thank you.
There's no way you're going to score, but shoot it at his pad at the middle of the net where the rebound's going to go right out in the front.
You don't like hearing pucks go off the glass. You don't like that.
Mike, I'll tell you a few things. Clint, you too. Number one is, I always tell them, every age group, this is from pro down, I say half the goals scored are on a second chance opportunity in front of the net. It behooves you to get very good at that. Yep. Here's the other thing too. Go ahead, Clint. Sorry.
Well, you could throw in screens and deflections too.
Right. It's such an underdeveloped or understudied part of the game at the youth levels. Clint, you were talking a few minutes ago, and this all connects, right? About men versus women, or boys versus girls. When I really got into studying coaching, I realized that, and I was very into hockey. I said, I have to look at other sports. I remember starting that. Like, I need to look at basketball and football and see how they do it. And man, that really expanded my knowledge. But then I started coaching different genders. And I learned a lot. Female players tend to bond a lot faster than boys and men. And I learned a lot about how to do that even more effectively by coaching women. So I think that it's so important that you try different things. And with that said, for the parents listening, this is what I tell kids and parents. You want to be a great winger, play defense. You want to be a great defenseman, play center. They used to call me, Mike, I don't remember if I told this story, but when I was growing up, I started playing at 12. I was pretty late. And I could skate like the wind, but I could not score. They used to call me Stone Hands. That was the nickname they gave me. And I just like you kind of talked about with sports psyching, that book, the method of education to start learning how to score was going to goalie clinics. I volunteered to go to goalie clinics. And you know what? I learned how goalies think.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then I started scoring because I understood.
Another great concept is to make every player on the team go in goal for one practice. And all of a sudden, I'll tell you one thing, the older kids that can shoot high and shoot hard, they're going to respect that goalie a little more.
Yes.
You know what I mean? They're not zinging him by his ears and that. I think that you learn what that position is and what goes into that position.
Yeah, there's no doubt we've come such a long way in goalie development, I think, and knowing, I'm even on this show, having talked to so many different goalies now, and where the game was and how a goalie was just like the fat, slow kid to now, one of the
Goldberg,
best, like the best athletes, on the planet. And really the mentally toughest athletes on the planet. And I think, you mentioned it earlier, like the one aspect I think that kids can learn in the goaltending position is, for a lot of ways, they do have the time to do what you're doing, Clint, right? And reset and think about, like, they have the time between, and maybe me as a coach, I have to understand that, like, I need to have the relationship with my goaltender to say, hey, listen, a goal scored, like, you got to give me a sign, like, do you need more time? Right. To work through this, and I'll I could break a stick on the bench, or lose an edge, or I could question something a little harder. Like we can work together with our goaltenders to allow them to have that structure, to allow them to have that ability to say, okay, I have time here. Let me reset. Let me go through my whatever routine it is. Doesn't have to be what you did, Clint. It could be whatever, right? But knowing that we can work together to understand, like, a goalie doesn't get the opportunity. Like, if I'm a defenseman and I'm on the ice for a really bad goal and my coach pulls me off the ice, I probably have like 6 minutes to digest that.
Well, Mike, I was going to say, just look up Patrick Waugh in 1995 if you want to know the effects of not giving your goaltender a moment.
Well, you lose a franchise kid. But I think, I think that's really understanding, now that we know what we know, right? Yeah. Understanding that this is something that we can strategize and work together on, and to your point, communicate that to the rest of our team, because my forwards and my D, it's built into the way the game is structured, that they can go on the bench, the coach could talk to them, you can coddle them, you could yell at them, whatever it is, you could do the things you need to do. But our goaltenders don't get that opportunity.
No, they don't. They the puck is dropped, and they gotta be mentally ready. And it's not.
I know my assistant coach used to get so mad at me when we, at the youth level, we used to switch goalies like at the halfway mark of games. Like, when one kid would play half the game, the other kid played the other half the game, and we'd always, like, I wasn't even thinking sometimes, like, I would, if the time where the kid had to switch, if the face off was in our zone, we'd always defer and say, okay, I'll give up the extra time, but let's not put this brand new goaltender into a place where the puck is already at their feet. Like, why don't we put them in when the faceoff's in the neutral zone or the other end? So it's like the first thing they don't see when they get in the net is a shot on net. And I think that's just something to strategize about, trying to think about, how am I structuring the game? But to your point, we need to build in these opportunities for the goaltenders.
Yeah. The goalie can move around a little bit if the faceoff's at the other end. You can, you can watch
get your feel.
Get the feel and get his edges and get some pushes in.
Mike, you're also making me think about, you're talking about, and Clint, you too, about how we don't give the goalies the time. Man, we don't even do that between periods. Think about it. What's the go-to? Hey, you okay? You okay? All right, good. Let me talk to the rest of the team for the 2 minutes that I have about the offensive zone forecheck that we're sucking at.
Right.
Clint, I wanted to talk about your work a little bit too. You're the vice president and founder of the Ranch Teammates for Life, which is committed to supporting others suffering from PTSD, brain injuries, and other mental or emotional distress, as we talked about. I just want to give you some time to talk about the organization and how it's working to break the stigma surrounding mental health.
Well, what we've done, it was the Mark Pavlich, who was, New York Ranger and gold medal champion in 1980. He had some mental health issues, ended up dying by suicide. But it was him that really wanted to start this ranch, him and Barry Beck, former NHLer. And along with Mark's sister Jean, they got a hold of me. I don't know how it was, couple 3 years ago, and said, would you like to be involved? I said, sure. And then they said, we'd like you to be the president. And I was like, I can't even send an email. So so I ended up being the vice president. And what we're trying to do is help, like you said, veteran athletes because a lot of post-career players struggle, and a lot of it's concussions, because concussions can cause anxiety, depression, and some mental health issues down the road. So we do anybody with brain trauma, mental issues, depression, anxiety, addiction, things like that. And it's not just for former NHL players. It's for any player, any sport. We will not turn anybody away. But it's also for military veterans. We formed with the Eagles Healing Nest in Minnesota, which is an organization that helps veterans. And a lot of these veterans would be homeless without the Eagles Healing Nest. And they were nice enough. Melanie Butler, who founded the Eagles Healing Nest, donated us a building on there. We're renovating it right now. We're raising funds, and that's what we want to do. We just want to help people and prevent, I'm a suicide survivor. Mark died by suicide. We've had some junior hockey players and NHL, former NHLers especially, that have died by suicide or overdoses. And so we want to prevent that. I believe God spared me for those that are still suffering. So, I've almost died 3 times, and once was, an attempt at my own life. So I'm very passionate about being alive, number one, and I'm here for a purpose, and I better make note of it and work on it.
Yeah, and hearing you talk about this, and this is for the audience, again, through your various ways of finding you speak online, it's so inspirational. And
Thank you.
No, thank you. I thank you for being courageous enough to do what you're doing, right? You speak so freely about it and with so much passion that it's infectious, and we all play a role in helping each other, right? And I think the ranch is just one of the many places where that's happening. And I'll tell you, in my work with military veterans as well, one of the things that leads to depression and eventually sometimes suicide is the loss of 3 things. And when you're done a pro career in sports or military, you will lose these 3 things immediately: purpose, identity, and community. And when those 3 things disappear, you are in a very bad position. And we need to provide veterans and athletes with purpose, identity, and community, preferably before they retire, right? Like this process should start years in advance, but you're providing that. And I've always been amazed, Clint, at this concept that someone who has suffered like you and has been in the position that you've been in finds solace in helping people in similar positions. And I think that is a key. I think that unlocks a key for people, that if you're feeling a certain way, I find that reaching out and helping other people is an amazing healing process. Right. And you do that. Obviously, the ranch does that. I'm going to talk a minute about how the Minnesota Wild are doing that. But we all play a role in that. And I think that's one of the major parts of this episode we want to share.
Well, yeah, I have certain tools that I use to keep my daily balance, especially when I do struggle. I do take medication. I don't like the alternative. Some people are anti-meds, but I don't like the alternative. I went to a very dark, bad place. Working out, and there's a couple of counseling, but the biggest one is being of service. It gives me such gratification and purpose when and a lot of people say, I don't have time to join the Rotary Club. Being a service can be opening the door for somebody, smiling smiling at a coworker when you really don't feel like it. You're kind of grumpy or even pissed off.
Right.
You'd be surprised. You get out of yourself and into others. And that's why I love public speaking, because people come up to me after and say, wow, I'm going to go get help. Wow, I'm going to talk to my parents. Wow, I'm going to talk to a doctor, and they're tearful. We're hugging, it's like selfishly, I think I do it for myself. It makes me feel so good.
Hey, there's nothing wrong with that. And
no, there isn't.
yeah, sometimes getting out of here, getting out of your own head, and like you said, I love the way you put that, putting it in someone else's shoes.
You made me think of I do coaching with we're called USA Warriors, and there's not every city, a lot of cities around the US have disabled vets, and they join these USA Warriors, and we do tournaments, and we do them all over the place. And I'll tell you what, I get to coach, and and I get to meet them and hear a lot of stories, and my God. But a lot of them that, I had a one-armed defenseman, and you wouldn't even know he had one arm. I had a one-eyed goalie. It was a fantastic. But the thing is, most of them have, if they're not physically disabled, it's a PTSD thing. And they say that hockey, that camaraderie, it just fills a void that they missed. And they got into it. Some of them didn't play hockey. They had to learn how to skate. And it's a blast. And it's very gratifying.
Yeah, I got to say, I do a lot of coordinating with the Wounded Warrior Project, and we do a lot of sled hockey events and Wounded Warrior hockey events. And there's no doubt that the people, I always feel bad about asking people to help me do these things, like asking, firemen, policemen, service people. They're always the first ones to add service. Like, and then they'll leave. Like, I'll send out a thank you note. Oh, guys, thanks so much for coming, blah, blah, blah. And every single one of them, like, are you kidding me? Like, it was the most gratifying experience that I've ever had to do this. And I think that's what's missing. I try to do this with all our kids, that I coach too, is, service is, like you said, it doesn't have to be extreme, but if you can do it, it's amazing how many kids jump on board to say, wow, I really enjoyed that. And I like that. And wow, I didn't realize how fortunate and lucky and, that I am. Yeah. And if I can do a little bit, and look how joyful this other person is. And like you're saying, sometimes that's the best part of those people's, whole year is that tournament, because they don't get that joy in other areas of their life. And I think that's a great, just a thing for the audience, that you can seek out and find like organizations like yours to add service to. That doesn't cost you anything. You don't have to give money. You just add your time and a little bit of effort. And I think, it's amazing, how much joy you get back from working with these different, whether it's a Wounded Warriors or disabled vets or, I work a lot with the ASHA, American Special Hockey Groups. Any way you could give, your expertise and your joy, it's going to make you feel just as
like
good.
Giving a gift at the holidays. You always feel better when you give the gift.
It's always a gift. Yeah, and I think it just goes unnoticed a lot when we're all hustling and bustling and getting private lessons and going to tournaments and spending money on bags and jackets and hats. And when we go, wow, I could just do this one little thing and it would be more impactful than anything else I do for my kids.
Mike, you're in Colorado, right?
I'm in New York.
Oh, you're in New York. Okay, it's Lou's down in
Lou's in Colorado still. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
They have a big disabled American veterans winter sports classic in Aspen. And oh man, what a trip. You got blind skiers, and you got sled hockey and snorkeling and canoeing, and oh man, it's fun to see the smiles on those veterans.
Yeah, and again, it doesn't cost you more than anything but your time.
Yeah.
And I'll say this, guys, before I jump into this last question here is, I've studied this, biologically, humans are not meant to operate alone. We are, from an animal level, meant to be together. We are meant to work together. And there's a lot of forces right now ripping us apart from each other. And it's not surprising to me that it's causing problems. But at a base level, we are supposed to help each other. We are supposed to take care of each other. It's hard for people to embrace that concept right now. But I'm hell bent on making sure that we learn how to trust to work together again. Clint, I'm gonna make sure I bring this up before the episode ends. We also know the Minnesota Wild have taken a really proactive stance on mental health. They're doing a thing called Hockey Talks. I don't know where my accent came from there. But there's these little segments. Again, today's date's February 7th, 2023. If you're listening to this in the future, this is something they do annually. And next week, the University of Minnesota head coach PJ Fleck's going to be speaking at the St. Paul River Center, which is a great location. All the Let's Play Hockey Expos there is every year. How important are events like these to furthering the conversation? Again, I know you speak about this all the time, but we're starting to see the other things sprout up.
Yeah, I spoke at that Hockey Talks in Minnesota last year.
Right.
I was my wife was with me too. She spoke with me. Great. These things, I think we got, I can't remember, don't quote me on this. I think we got 17 teams that are doing Hockey Talks, but a lot of teams, if they're not doing Hockey Talks, they're doing a mental health awareness night.
Right.
I'm supposed to go to Buffalo next month and do their game. And yeah, I think it's so important that we look up to our athletes and celebrities, and then when you see them doing things that are helping people, it just opens up the door for that person that's struggling in silence to say, hey, Marc-Andre Fleury is an advocate for this, or whoever it might be. Maybe I should go, talk to somebody. It just opens up the awareness and the conversation.
Yeah, it's first off, it's awesome to see the NHL taking a step forward with this. And again, look, we've said the whole episode, we've got a long way to go, but it's going the right direction. I feel like we finally have we're walking the right line. And Clint, again, look, you're a champion in this realm. I'm so thankful that you came on today. I'm thankful for the ranch and everything that you do, that you stand for. I'm glad you're here, and you tell your story with such courage. There's no stumbling in it. Do you know what I mean? It's just like, this is who I am. This is what I've done. And this is why I'm here. Yeah. I think we need more people like that right now that are not afraid to talk about their lives in that way, because we all deal with this on some level. Every one of us. There's not one person that is just mentally fit all the time. It doesn't exist.
No, it
right?
Sure doesn't. Yeah.
So Mike, any final words before I close this out?
No, I just appreciate Clint, you being on. And I think, we talk a lot on our show about, access for kids and access for the sport of hockey. But I think one of the things you've done is, provide access for mental health. And it's the same thing if you're a parent, if you're getting your kid power skating lessons or shooting classes or goaltending lessons or whatever it might be. I mean, this has to be top in your priority of, how you're going to, what your workshop is going to look like for your kids each year. And I think adding some type of mental health and development in there is it should be on top of mind for every one of our parents.
Absolutely, I agree 100%. Anybody that wants to reach out, I try not to give advice, but it's hard to, because I'm not really a doctor. Well, I am. It's honorary though, so I don't know anything.
That's true. That is true.
But they can go to my website. It's malarchuk.com. You can email me through that, and if you got questions or need a little bit of direction or something, I will try to help.
Well, and I was going to say, at minimum, visit that website or just search Clint's name, Clint Malarchuk. You'll find everything you need to know about this man, who, I do want to reiterate, had a 12-year NHL career. When you talk about the puck bouncing over you, you don't make it 12 years of the NHL if you don't have some idea of what you're doing. But Clint, fantastic episode. Thank you for being here today. That's going to do it for this episode of Our Kids Play Goalie. Again, all of our episodes of Our Kids Play Goalie and Our Kids Play Hockey can be found at ourkidsplayhockey.com or wherever you listen. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to share it with your friends, your coaches, your kids, your team snap, wherever it is that you do it. If you're on Live Barn, put it in chat. I don't have chat, but you know what I mean. Share this. We got to get this message out there. And we'll see you next time in another edition of Our Kids Play Goalie. Thanks for Mike Benelli, Clint Malarchuk, I'm Lee Elias. We'll see you next time. We hope you enjoyed this edition of Our Kids Play Hockey. Make sure to like and subscribe right now if you found value wherever you're listening, whether it's a podcast network, a social media network, or our website, ourkidsplayhockey.com. Also, make sure to check out our children's book, When Hockey Stops, at whenhockeystops.com. It's a book that helps children deal with adversity in the game and in life. We're very proud of it. But thanks so much for listening to this edition of Our Kids Play Hockey, and we'll see you on the next episode.